Well, the wait is over, guys. I know I've been getting countless and countless requests to do a video of a Speed 3, and I'm proud to show you guys this. This is a 2012 Mazda Speed 3 hatchback. Now, it's not the 2013 like I said I was going to show you guys, but the 2012 model is pretty much the same as the 13, although the 13 did get some cosmetic updates like different wheels and the touchscreen nav in the center stack, which I guys showed you on the 2013 just Mazda 3 video that I have. Now, the Speed 3 has got quite a reputation in this market, you know, for being boost happy, for being a handful, for being, I guess, the most powerful pocket rocket on the market in terms of the front-wheel drive models. Now, the second generation has actually been with us since 2010. This 2012 that I have is pretty much, you know, the same as the 2010. The 13 model got a slightly, you know, updated darkened finish wheels, some updated finishes in the front and the grille insert, and then the interior got those new touchscreen radio. But aside from the powertrain, that first generation Speed 3, which I've shown you guys, actually has the same engine as this car. This one, Mazda said they just tuned it differently to be a little bit more user-friendly in terms of on-road driving dynamics. I guess they just kind of played with the torque output and they changed the gear ratios in the 6-speed. Now, the look of the Speed 3 is definitely unique. It's got that smiley face grille at the front, and it really shows off on this Speed 3, especially compared to that 2013 just regular Mazda 3 that I showed you. This particular one is missing the Mazda Speed 3 tech package, as it only has the projector beam halogen headlights, no HIDs here, but you can distinguish a Speed 3 basically from that grinning front end, the almost devilish looking front end, and the hood scoop at the front. Now, those 18-inch wheels are standard equipment. They are riding on 225/40 R18s, and then you know, looking at the side profile, it looks pretty much like a regular Mazda 3, but when you come to the rear, it's got a larger rear wing spoiler. The regular Mazda 3 hatchbacks don't have that. And ignore those darkened taillights. That's something that the previous owner did. The Mazda 3s actually do not come with those darkened taillights, but you do get those nice dual outlet exhaust tips at the back. Now, looking at the interior of the second generation Mazda Speed 3, it's got these rather unique looking you know, half leather, half cloth insert with that weird red pattern in the center. It kind of looks a little dated to me. I'm not really a big fan of that. These are the standard seats. Even if you get the tech package, you'll get seats like that. Now, when you step inside the Mazda Speed 3, it's, you know, it's a pretty easy step in height. This is just, you know, it's a regular Mazda 3. Now, push button start is available when you get the tech package, but this one doesn't have it. So here's the switchblade key. Stick the key in the ignition. And you can see the Speed 3 gives you those red specific gauges. The other models will give you the blue colored gauges. And, you know, from what I remember on the 2008 Speed 3 that I showed you, the engine and exhaust sounds pretty much the same. It has a rather, you know, throaty, nice sounding exhaust. I'm definitely very pleased with that. Now, when you shut the door, the window is automatic up down for the driver only, no passengers. And surprisingly, you still get dual zone automatic climate control, even on this more basic model, as well as the Bose stereo system. I'm surprised that it comes standard on this car. I've always thought it was part of the tech package, but I believe Mazda started changing that. Now, here's the center stack of this 2012 model. I showed you that 13 where it had the touchscreen. This is before it became available. In the past, if you want to nav, that was the nav screen, and they put the controls on the steering wheel, and you can see that's a very tiny screen. It's basically just, you know, reserved for your audio controls. It shows your little presets there, and it shows your fuel economy information, which this one surprisingly has been averaging 28.3. And, you know, you have your secondary tiny screen over there that shows your, you know, climate control information, and then another redundant control or display for the radio. Now, the center stack here has pretty much, you know, it's kind of button crazy. The labels are nicely labeled, but the buttons are pretty small. I definitely prefer the touchscreen that's in the newer systems. And then, of course, I like the simple climate controls. This one does have only a 6-speed manual. Don't even think about asking Mazda for, you know, an automatic. And the throws are actually much better than that 08. The shifter doesn't have like a clunky feel to it, and it's a pretty short throw, and it's pretty, you know, easy to, you know, find the gear that you need to go into. The clutch is on the heavy side again, but it's not as heavy as that first gen. As far as the interior quality, I've pretty much touched base that I think that the current Mazda 3's interior is definitely starting to get old. I mean, of course, you still get soft touch materials, the silver painted plastic here. The door panels are hard plastic, and then of course you get like kind of the same weird pattern here. But see, from that 2013 Mazda 3, you can see this one's actually leather stitched. And I love the contrast red leather. And this is what I meant. This is what I meant in that white one. I wanted that white one was a top trim Grand Touring, and it was missing leather stitching here, and it was softly padded. So Mazda did kind of go backwards a little bit on some of the 2013 models. The steering wheel has actually an indent here for where your thumb will go, and it has the same requisite red stitching. You know, it's kind of the Mazdaspeed3 theme here. The center stack here is padded again, leather stitch. That 2013 model, if you remember, didn't have it, so that's why I was complaining about it. The armrest does slide and adjust. I like that. Your center console here houses your aux port, but there's no USB port in here. Mazda actually added that for 2013. Looking at the glove compartment, it's a decent size. It's damped as well. Overall, you know, the interior of this car is actually, I think it has much better touch point finishes than that 13. But you can see here, no sunroof. The Mazdaspeed3 is still not available with a sunroof. I hope they change that for the next generation car. Now, the back seat of the Mazdaspeed3, the current one, is, you know, it's on the tighter side. But surprisingly, I think it gives you good foot space. I'm pretty short though, I'm only 5'7", no vents back here, but you do get a nice armrest with cup holders as well. And then when you look at the door panels on the back seats, they're pretty much the same as the front, hard plastic there, but again, leather stitch right here, and it's softly padded. Kind of wondering why they went backwards on the 2013 model. Now, again, the Speed 3 only comes as a hatchback. Don't even think about asking for a sedan. You still get about 17 cubic feet of space here. You can fold the seats down 60-40 and you'll get about 35 cubic feet of space. It's a very practical car. This is why I love hot hatches. And then, of course, when you get under this rather large hood with the hood scoop, you'll find the most powerful engine at the moment in terms of the front-wheel drive competition. This is Mazda's 2.3-liter MZR DI-SI. It's got direct fuel injection, turbocharged four-cylinder. You can see it's got a top-mounted intercooler, and it actually puts out the same 263 horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque as the first generation. It drives the front wheels, goes only to a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, Mazda actually limits torque in the first through third gears to help reduce the torque steer. Let's take a look and see if that is the case. Fuel economy is still 18 city, 25 highway on premium gas. First getting behind the wheel of the second generation Speed 3, I gotta say, it feels pretty familiar. It feels like a updated version of the first generation, but with slightly more refinement that I was complaining that the first generation lacked. Now, this engine is basically the same engine as the one in the first gen, and I gotta tell you, it feels about the same. I am noticing right off the bat, as soon as I planted my foot, there is a little bit more torque steer that I'm feeling in the steering. Compared to that first one. I'm not entirely sure why I'm noticing it more in this generation, but it's definitely there. Now, the engine makes a pretty nice sound still. That exhaust makes a really nice noise. It's got a very, you know, throaty, deep sound to it, and the engine in this car is definitely very boost happy. I mean, it's basically making the most power from about like 3,000 to about 5,500 RPM. After that, you really don't want to push this engine any harder than that because the boost starts to taper off. And one of the new features on this car that I really like is the fact that it has a boost gauge in here. The first generation didn't have it, and I really think every turbo car needs to have a boost gauge. Basically, the last one that doesn't have it now is the Volkswagen GTI, which I believe is coming for the MK7 version. Now, corners in the Speed 3 is still one of the best attributes of the car. The car just has a very flat, neutral attitude, and the steering is also very responsive. Now, as far as the ride quality, I definitely think that this newer one has a much more controlled ride. It's still definitely on the firmer side, but it doesn't crash as much. It's definitely been tuned to give you that little bit of everyday drivability that the first generation was definitely lacking. The seats are also very nice. While I think they're really ugly to look at, they hold you in place really well, and they also provide a lot of good comfort. I definitely would probably be pretty pleased driving this car on a longer trip in these seats. Steer there is pretty wild. So make sure if you guys are going to slam on the accelerator, make sure you're holding onto the wheel, because, you know, while corners in this thing are just plain out fun, the steering is very flat. The car has a very, you know, stable and secure feeling to it. As soon as you plant your foot, that torque steer will yank the steering out of your steering wheel, and I gotta tell you, it's definitely worse than that first generation that I drove, and definitely worse than the Focus ST. I mean, 280 foot-pounds of torque is just unbelievable, especially when it's going to the front wheels. You're gonna have a lot of wheel hop and a lot of torque steer, so be prepared for that. Now, the 18-inch wheels are large, and the turning radius is hampered. It's not as bad as the Focus ST, but it's still pretty bad. See it. You can actually feel Mazda's torque management system limiting torque in that first gear when I put my foot down. Really, it only gives you about 220 foot-pounds of torque in first through third gear, and I'm glad it's doing that, because this car is a handful when you put your foot down. So for those of you who are looking for the most raw power, the most brute force, this Speed3 will still satisfy you. Now, the clutch is definitely on the heavier side. It's not as vague as the first generation or that RX-8 that I drove, but it's definitely not as easy to use as like the GTI's clutch, the Focus ST's clutch, or the Civic SI's clutch. So this car is just more for professionals, for pros. I love the boost, you know, the boost happy feeling of this engine. It definitely produces a lot of grunt, especially when you're, you know, in the mid-range. That's where this engine definitely loves to be. Now, in terms of the visibility, this is just your typical Mazda 3. When you're, you know, settled down into 6th gear, the engine revs pretty low. It's actually surprisingly quiet, and I don't mind the ride quality. It's definitely not bad. It's definitely on the harder side still when I compared it to a Focus ST or a GTI, but it's not bad. I think that Mazda could really go, you know, even more into that refinement, you know, category that the brand so, you know, wants to go after. I know they're about fun to drive, but I see them moving more on toward refinement. They're trying to become more like Volkswagen, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the next generation Mazdaspeed3 is going to be like. So with all that said, if you guys are in the market for, you know, one of the front-wheel drive hot hatches, your choices are basically the Speed3, the Focus ST, and the GTI. And then, of course, if you don't want a hatch, you want a sedan or coupe, there's the Honda Civic Si or the Volkswagen GLI. But with all that, you know, all that information presented to you, I definitely think that the Mazdaspeed3 still makes sense on the market. It definitely has its own unique character, its own unique strengths to offer, as well as its own unique weaknesses. Let's face it, no car is perfect. I definitely think it's worth a look, especially for those of you who are craving the most power. Just the bragging rights. I mean, Mazdaspeed3 is the quickest to 60 for the front drivers at about 5.8 seconds. The Focus ST is not far off behind. I really think that Mazda should improve the gas mileage on the next generation, and they're probably going to also make the car a little bit more refined. There's the refinement that they need, as well as switch over to their much more handsome-looking Kodo design language. But anyways, guys, hope you've enjoyed my overview of this 2012 Mazdaspeed3. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you all later.